Well, I thank you so much for joining us today for another episode of Coro Chronicles. And today I can't even say how much of a special guest Brendon is because I literally stalked him to get him on the show. Because for many of you, you reach out to me asking me questions about music licensing, asking me questions of the why and the history and things like that. But today, you're getting the opportunity to see and meet and hear from the person that I go to when I have music licensing questions. So, Brendon, I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Debbie. That was a very kind introduction, and hopefully I won't bore your audience too much with my nuanced take on music licensing, the exciting world of music licensing. So if I go start rambling too much, then just bring me back. That's okay.
No worries. My audience, they're very used to rambling. They hear me all the time, every month when I do this, because I seem to always go off on It's just curiosity. Like you and I had chatted, like I don't really do a script because I think it's a lot more fun being more natural and the whole process being more organic. So yeah, so don't worry at all.
All
But
right.
speaking of an introduction, one part that I realized the other day is that obviously I know that you're an attorney. Yes, I know all of those things, but I don't know what got you into this. What attracted you to this aspect? Because to be honest, I have a number of friends that are in the legal profession. You are the only one that I know that has anything to do with music licensing.
Yeah, it was an interesting road that I took to get here, but I was not the type of person growing up who envisioned myself being a lawyer. That was not something that I thought of as a career path. As I was getting older, I have some colleagues who knew that they were going to be a lawyer back in middle school or elementary school.
Oh.
I didn't know what I wanted to do until I was late in college, actually. I was thinking that maybe I would write about music. I always just
Really?
was a fan of music growing up. And in college, as a hobby, just on the side, I would write for the college paper, giving interviews and writing reviews and articles about music.
Oh,
And the
wow.
music that I liked, which was
Right.
the more obscure and non-mainstream, the better. And so I found that to be a great outlet just for my own personal tastes. It was a selfish endeavor as well because I got free tickets to concerts, I got free CDs to
I think
view.
that's genius, by the way.
So it was great. It was just a voluntary position. I was just a contributor to the paper. I was not the editor of the entertainment section. So I just did it as a hobby. But I found that to be quite interesting. I also, in college, I had my major allowed me to take a range of courses. And so I ended up taking some musicology courses because they were fun, based studying the history of rock and roll
Oh, wow.
or music in film, things like that I thought were pretty enjoyable and counted towards my major. So I took some musicology classes, and one of the professors I took a class from, he revealed that he was an expert witness in copyright infringement cases. And that really piqued my interest. I was thinking, what does that mean? And he
Hmm.
explained that his analysis of two pieces of music was important in cases where one party was claiming infringement against another party or in regards to a piece of music. So that was interesting because it really opened up that side of things. Oh, there are lawyers working in this industry who were focused on these types of topics that involve the art of music, right? That was interesting to me. And in the course of taking a couple musicology classes, I believe I took another class from the same professor where it was a seminar and he sponsored me for an internship. I ended up interning at a major music publisher This is in Los Angeles. We have a lot of major music companies in this area. I went and worked there as an intern, and I worked in the music licensing department, and we were issuing mechanical licenses. And this is just a kind of a boring aspect of the music publishing business. But we were doing licensing, and all of the fellow interns around me were all law students, and they were at the law schools around the area, and they were all studying and hoping to become entertainment lawyers or music lawyers specifically. And that really made me think, okay, here's a career, a more traditional career as a lawyer, which is stable and something that you can do for a lifetime, right? Something that I think my parents would be happy to know that I would pick such a route, but also doing something, working in a field that I was really interested in, just being music, right? And I had initially thought that I was going to be a journalist and I would write about music. I would somehow be involved in music. Maybe I would work in a different area at a record label or a music publisher, maybe in marketing or in talent representation or something like that, right? But here, I didn't really know that there was a whole legal side to this business. And that didn't really come about until I was finishing up college. So really, I took a turn there and focused on that aspect of things and thought, okay, this is something that I could do as a career. Now, that's not the smartest thing to do, to go into law school and focus on such a narrow part of the legal profession, right? Normally, you're reducing your likelihood or chances of getting a job out of law school if you're just focused on this narrow part of the legal profession, right? So I was lucky enough, though, to work in music right out of law school and work for a law firm that was handling music clients. And that was a privilege and something that is not normal. Usually you come out of law school and you work, take any job you can get. You work at a big law firm and you do litigation and you do all these other things. And then maybe later you'd have the opportunity to focus in on a specific aspect of the legal profession. Maybe in this case, it'd be intellectual property, copyright, contracts, those types of things. And then maybe you can get into working for an entertainment law firm or representing talent or clients that work in the entertainment industry. So I just had the opportunity and luck that I ended up where I am today. So now it's been 23 years. Let's see, I started practicing in 2003, so about 23 years or so working in the entertainment industry and mainly in the music business. And it's been a long time. I feel like I know a lot, but I'm also just learning every day because it's very interesting. There's always nuances, there's always new developments
Oh, yeah.
in copyright, in the music industry. Things are changing rapidly and it's exciting. I feel like I can stay on the cusp, even though as I get older, I feel like in the legal profession, as you get older, you become wiser. And that's actually an attribute compared to
Like
maybe
life.
my younger colleagues. So yeah, that's where I ended up today. And yeah, it was a circuitous path, but yeah, I didn't really know what I wanted to do until late stage in college. And I feel like looking back, that's probably okay. I feel like it's probably more common than not that people don't really know exactly what they want to do with their lives
What they want to be when they grow up.
until maybe later stages.
So I
But
just have to ask, was like your original ambition was to like write for Rolling
yeah,
Stone or that?
right.
Okay. Okay.
I thought I'd be a rock journalist.
Yeah.
And I found that I thought at least I was a decent writer and I had some sort of musical taste that at least within my circle of friends, they would come to me and ask me, "Hey, do you have any music suggestions for me. Are you listening to what bands are you listening to these days? So at least within my circle of friends, I felt like I had a heightened taste in music that people came to me for, my opinion. So I felt, okay, maybe my opinion means something and people want to hear it.
Well,
And
that's what I'm doing today.
yeah, so
So I'm just like your friends. I'm like, yep, let's
yeah.
go to Brendon and ask.
So in a way, I am giving people my opinions still. It's my legal opinion.
Yeah.
And then I get joy in sometimes speaking with my clients who may be creators, authors, songwriters, performers,
Yeah.
that I can speak to them by drawing from my past and speak to them about the music they're making and what I think about it and have
No,
some
I mean,
sort
which
of sense of
really,
what they do and how they
yeah.
make their music and how they present themselves and how it comes across from someone who used to opine about people's music in the past. I find that it gives me a little bit of maybe a step up compared to maybe other lawyers in the business, but certainly there are plenty of lawyers in the music business who were formerly musicians themselves, performers
Mhm.
themselves, understand music. So I'm not the only one.
I knew like bringing you on, it was going to give such insight to our audience, but I also knew I was going to learn a lot too. But now I have really almost like a different lens of you because of where you came from. And what you were just saying is like you have clients that you have this kind of this different empathetic kind of insight to them because you're seeing them as the artist, the performer, and it's not only just where their life leads and career and all this, but it's also the aspect of that when they create something that goes into a commercial space that they get paid for that, which
Right,
obviously goes right into what we're going to talk about today. And that's the
right.
reason why just to give a little bit of a baseline, I know one of the questions I get asked all the time is all the world of the acronyms. Like the people will ask me on trainings like PRO, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, what is this or what are they? Their history, their purpose. I've even had a couple of people that have even flat out just said, is this just a made up service so somebody can make money?
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that. And I appreciate that the folks who are operating businesses out there are not necessarily thinking about these things in their businesses. They're thinking about their core business and what they're offering and who their customers are and how to provide
Right.
an environment that people will keep coming back to and people will providing a good service and so forth. And music, the use of music is really the last thing in that checklist of things they
Right.
need to provide. And music is often something that is, like we say in this business, a background, right? Especially in the businesses that we work with in this field of business establishments that use music in the background. And it's there as a part of, as I think about it, it's used as a part of the enhancement of the environment, where the facility, in the healthcare space, providing something that is better than a sterile environment to walk into as a patient sitting in the lobby, right? Or in the elevator or in the doctor's room, thinking about lots of things that aren't necessarily the most enjoyable things to think about. Sometimes it's stressful, right, for
Right.
a patient to be in that space, right? And so, what are the things that a business can add to provide comfort to their customers, right? Their patients, their visitors, and make it something warm and inviting, right? And so music is an
There and
obvious
here.
choice, right? And so it adds to the ambiance. Music is great, a piece of entertainment in that it can be in the background as well as the foreground. It can be
Mhm.
both, right? It shifts from one to the other, and we can
Mhm.
listen to music and do other things. We can work, we can play, we can enjoy music as the background and still have conversations with one another. So it is the ideal way to provide an enhancement in a public space. And so I understand that maybe it's not at the top of your client's list of things to think about, but yeah, that's where we come in and we can help out with these types of offerings and make sure that what they do is within the parameters of the law and that
Right.
ultimately it's not just about all of these acronyms that you were talking about, these companies out there that are administering these rights and going out there and collecting these fees, just trying to collect fees, and there's no underlying purpose for it. These fees ultimately are paid out to the people who make this music and make the art that we are essentially listening to in the background, right? And provide that enhancement and enjoyment in the public space, right? Ultimately, that money does go to the songwriters, the authors, and the music publishers,
Mhm.
the people out there who are creating the music, and then also the ones who are helping facilitate the
Mhm.
music to get out there and be used commercially. And
Right.
so, yes, this is a economy. The music business is a big economy and money is paid to companies, but it's also it gets paid to the authors of this
Right.
music. And if you think about it that way, how do these people get paid
Mhm.
for their art? And
It's just like when you think about it, you think about a lobby, like we don't even think twice about it. That if I'm a decorator for a company, a commercial real estate entity, and my job is to go find original art. It's not even a thought process that I need to pay for that. That there are probably a couple of people when I make that payment that it's going to get distributed. The artist, maybe they're already in a gallery, and all of that. We don't think twice about it. But yes, when you talk about music, it's like I have to pay for having music. There's such still this disconnect. But if they just stopped, and that's what I'm hoping, even having this conversation, is that there's someone who wrote it, but that doesn't necessarily that means it's the person that performed it.
right,
That you think about like playing Reba McEntire, and just because I live here in Nashville, but it's that there are all these people, including the person who wrote the song for her, who performed it, and then you've got the publisher. I mean, they distribute all of these entities, but they all funnel through what are referred to as PROs, but the ASCAP, the BMI, the CSAC, the GMRs of the world.
right.
So another question that I will get asked too is why are there so many of them? Like, why do we need all of them?
Well, we're in the United States and we value competition, right? That's how we've ended up with four of them now, is
Uh,
merely because there's a capitalistic spirit here in this country, and there is more than one performing rights organization out there. But for a while there was one, and then there were two, and then there were three, and for many years there were just three, right? So the fourth one, GMR, only came along in the past 15 years, I think. So that one's only a recent development. But yeah, the first one I believe was ASCAP, and that has been around for over 100 years. And then the next one was BMI, and that one was maybe been around for nearly 100 years. And then I think CSAC was around for the same time as BMI has been around. I may be wrong on the exact dates here, but they've been around for quite some time. And ASCAP was formed because for probably a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons being that there was a shift, I believe, back in this is the early 1900s, right? I think it was 1914 when ASCAP was formed.
oh,
Yeah, right. This
wow. I
is,
didn't even know that.
yeah. So this is a long time ago, and the way that people consumed music was much different back in the day.
Yeah.
Primarily, music was sold as sheet music, and it really wasn't. it really wasn't publicly performed in public spaces, in bars or restaurants and venues or places like that frequently. It was really selling sheet music. It was really the primary way that people would consume music. They would purchase it and then they would perform it
Yeah,
like
that's what I was
personally.
thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking about personally, but then I'm thinking like I just watched this old Western documentary not too long ago, but that's what it was when you saw in a bar, is you saw a piano player.
Yeah. So there
Yeah.
was a shift, and I think that places like bars and restaurants and other public spaces like that started performing music. And that was it was commercial in the sense that it was part of
Yeah.
their bringing in customers to
Right.
pay for food and beverage and what have you, and maybe they would charge admission at the door. And these were public performances of music. And
Yeah.
now the public performance of music had previously been a right that was granted to a copyright owner. So just step back for a moment. If I author a piece of music, I am granted a bundle of rights called underneath the copyright. So it's protected by copyright because it's an original work of authorship
Mm-hmm.
that's fixed in a medium. So it's fixed, meaning that I have written it down on a piece of sheet music. It's not just
Yeah.
something that exists in my head still. So it has to be
Mm-hmm.
fixed in a medium. So once that happens, then I have a copyright, and that copyright then gives me a set of exclusive rights. And back in the day, there was an act, a copyright act that goes back much earlier than ASCAP, and there was a right to publicly perform a work, and that was one of the bundle of rights that, as an author, I would have if I created a musical work. So
Musical.
the public performance right was there, but there was no real enforcement mechanism back then. And it was, and I think, as I understand it, ASCAP
Yeah.
was a nonprofit organization. It's a collection of music publishers and songwriters that they came together in order to form this organization that would be there to issue licenses for their catalog of music to these establishments in
Mhm.
order to collect fees, in order to essentially enforce this public performance that was not being enforced before. And that was due to the fact that there was a kind of a change in how music was enjoyed during this time to becoming more enjoyed more in a public space. So ASCAP was formed because of that, because there really was no mechanism for an individual who's an author to go out
Yeah.
and attempt to license their copyrighted work to all of these places and to collect fees for that, right? So there needed to be an organization, a collective, to be able to go out and say, hey, we have a catalog of music.
Mhm.
You can play this music in your establishment in return for compensating us, and we will pay these revenues to our members. And that's how ASCAP started. And
That's how the
so
first came about.
and so that's
Mm.
and that underlying purpose, right, and reasoning for its existence, I think, led to the other companies, BMI and SESAC,
Mhm.
starting as well. And essentially, they do the same thing as ASCAP, and they just happen to represent different catalogs. And
I think
so,
that's what a lot of people don't
yeah,
understand. They think that they choose if they are wanting to, like one of our partners, if they want to have a contract, let's just say with ASCAP, they think that ASCAP is just you just pick one, whichever you want to select, but that's the only one, and that's a big misunderstanding too.
correct. Yeah, so there's a little bit of history on why these companies started, and it's really focused on the public performance right that is
Mhm.
bundled within a copyright. So these industries popped up out of the copyright itself, right? So one of the other bundled rights is the right to distribute, right? So the industry that pops up out of that is the record labels, right?
Mhm.
They're distributing the music, right, to be sold. And the other one of the other rights is the rights to create reproductions, okay, to reproduce, make copies or a phono record, okay? That industry is both music publishing and the record labels, okay? They're making copies and distributing them, right, as records or sheet music in music publishing industry, and so these industries came out of the copyright, the underlying copyright, and the bundle of rights that the authors have, and these industries are there to represent the rights
Mhm.
of the authors. And ultimately, that's how the authors get paid for their creative works.
Well, it's interesting because you're just touching on a base. I mean, you had mentioned momentarily about mechanical rights, and I know a little enough just to get in trouble with that. But it's interesting when you think about how we as consumers have listened to music. So it's like you're saying, it's having sheet music and playing live and piano, and then like the evolution of even within my time frame is like 8 track. Like I remember when my dad brought home an 8 track to go in the car, and that was like such a big deal. Listening to the radio. For a lot of us, that's how
Right,
we were first introduced to music. And then you go into cassette tape and LPs or vinyl, and then now this whole world of streaming music,
right,
which that's and it's interesting because we're talking about you're paying for the usage, and that's another misnomer that it's a little bit of a struggle sometimes for me to be able to teach to this because a lot of our communities and even hospitals, they'll come back and say, we're using my personal YouTube account, or I'm using my Spotify account, and not realizing that licensing is so different from individual or personal usage in like your room or your private space or your car versus commercial usage. We're talking
yeah,
through that, but
right.
it's a slippery slope when you get into those conversations. But anything that you want to add to that, or maybe for somebody watching going, wait, I have Spotify, I have my personal account, I pay all those PRO people.
I think the distinction can be made here is how you're receiving the music, right? And that's maybe an easier way to think about it, right? And we were talking about public performance. The key term in in those words is public, right? So
Public.
public performance is defined in the Copyright Act, and it's defined as something that it's something that performance that takes place in a, I'm just summarizing here. Performance that takes place beyond just your circle, your family, and your circle of friends, right? Something to that effect is what it actually says in the Copyright Act. And so if you're at home and you're listening to music and you put it on your radio, or if you have it, or you just put on a record, however you want to consume music these days, a lot of the times you're just streaming the music through your Spotify or Apple, whatever you may be
Right.
subscribing to
Yeah.
as your music provider, and you're just streaming music by Bluetooth to your speaker, right? That is all happening in a private space,
Mm,
and so that's not going to bring up any sort of public performance right
mm,
that you need to worry about, okay, in that space. However, once you bring that performance, the music that's playing,
right.
if you then put that same situation and you introduce it into a public space, a place that's open to the public, where people gather beyond your
Hmm.
family or your close circle of friends, right? So then it becomes a public performance, right? And so that is going to encompass a broad range of businesses, right? Because for the most part,
Right.
they're open to the public. Once you do that, then your performance of music in that space becomes public, right? And then we have to think about, okay, this is a public performance. Do we
Hmm.
have, is my space license to perform that music. And the PROs like ASCAP, BMI, SESAC, and GMR that we
Okay.
just talked about, they've been in this business for a long time, GMR excluded. They've been doing this for a long time and they license businesses. Frequently, they go out and they actually are educating their businesses
Yeah.
just like you do with your clients as well. And they are telling them, hey, you need to have a license to publicly perform this music in your business, whether it's music that comes through the TV screens that you have up in your restaurant, whether you have a jukebox in the corner where someone is putting quarters in, or maybe in these days you just use an app and then you can control the jukebox from your phone. And or if there's overhead music that's being controlled by the bartender, any of that's all music being performed in a public space. So that is all subject to a license.
Yep, those are the two key questions just to always ask. Am I playing it
Right.
privately or am I playing it
Yes.
publicly?
Yeah. The key is
Yeah, it's interesting.
public performance as opposed to private performance.
Yep, completely.
Yeah.
Before I've been with Coro now for what, 15 years or so. Before that, I worked for a company, DMX, which was later acquired from Mood and Mood Media. And that was one of the things, like there used to be like these legendary stories that we would always hear. And one of them was just what you're talking about. There was I won't say the name, but there was a restaurant that was a chain and they were turning the volume up on through their TVs. And they had been issued a letter because there were ASCAP reps that lived in this area. And it was an ASCAP rep who went to the restaurant, who heard the TV, went did whatever they do, sent the letter, and letting them know that you are using this as a public performance because you have your volume on the TV. And the restaurant owner had no idea that even counted because it was a commercial. And he was under the impression that no, if it comes through a commercial, it's already been paid for, it's been taken care of, and it's a commercial. It's irrelevant to my bar, my restaurant. And that was a hefty fine that we had heard about because I guess there was like a cease and desist or whatever.
Yeah.
And they went to court through this argument.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that's probably the exception to what actually happens in practice. We always joke about the ASCAP, police or the BMI police
Yeah.
coming to your place of business. They usually are not very aggressive when they're visiting your place of business or sending these letters. They are really trying to just provide outreach and education
Mhm.
to inform new businesses or old businesses that haven't been complying to make sure that they comply, right? And if someone is egregious about it, then it may end up being something that they pursue. And in fact, these organizations do have rights to, on behalf of their members, their songwriters and
Mhm.
publishers that they
Yeah, the
represent,
artist.
to
Yeah.
go after these folks. But I think that generally, in my experience, these organizations have taken an even-handed approach in just trying to educate a lot of these
Mhm.
businesses, knowing that a lot of these businesses don't understand or don't think about these things. Again, they're
Yeah.
thinking about what am I gonna put on my menu, or
Mhm.
what types of better services can we provide? And they're not necessarily thinking about if I play music through the speakers, overhead speakers in my lobby or in the waiting room or in the background of my restaurant, that I
Yeah.
need to get proper licenses for those uses.
Yeah, there
So,
was an article that I read years ago, and it was a restaurant owner, and he owned a New York authentic Italian restaurant, and he was upset because of someone had come in and to review his food, restaurant, and so forth, a food critic, and he was given 4 stars, and he was offended by that. and was like, why not? This is all authentic, everything from even the wood of the tables, all of this. And it was because he was playing rock and roll music.
Ah.
And he was humbled by it, but I think initially was just devastated because he personally loves rock and roll music. And it was because he would listen to rock music as he was going through culinary school. And it was just part of his personal experience. So when he created and built the restaurant, the menu, the furniture, the decor, and all of this, he just kept that feel, but it was just his relationship with rock and roll music versus putting that same kind of nuance of that, oh, using like true like richness and woods, richness and flavors, also the richness in the music of playing really true, authentic Italian music. And for him, it dropped him like half a star because of that.
Setting aside the food critics' own personal
Hmm.
taste, right? What I take from that is that this restaurant owner was expressing himself, not
Yeah.
just in the food and
Hmm.
how the decor in the restaurant and so forth, but in the music that he played in this restaurant. And certainly, I've gone to many restaurants that have an ambiance, and it really the music that they're playing makes a difference. If they're playing music that I like or appreciate, and I feel like it's well curated, that adds to my experience and makes it more enjoyable. And so yeah, and I think that's what's great about music is that not only is the creator of the music expressing themselves in their art, but then the listener then can experience it in their own way. And in fact, can then take that and curate what they enjoy and then express it to others and be like, hey, this is the music I like. And then maybe others will enjoy it too. And it's a great way I feel like music transcends because it, it has an effect on this kind of line of people here. You go from the creator to the listeners to the fans, and it can enhance so many different experiences
Oh,
as
yes.
opposed to other forms of art, and not suggesting that music is superior to other forms of art, but I feel other forms of art, maybe looking at a painting in an art
Mhm.
gallery or watching a film, right, is something that really takes a lot of concentration. Whereas music is it can be a part of our lives in the background, as we talked about before. And that's cool. It's unique, I feel like, in the artistic space where it can be
No, I
something that
completely agree.
supplements or
Mhm.
enhances something else that we're doing or is a part of our presentation or expression of who we are, expressing, oh, I like this band or I like this artist, right? Or you told me you like Reba McEntire, right? I get a sense when you tell me that of the type of person you are, whether that's stereotypical or not, but I get a
Mhm.
sense of what you enjoy, and that's how we express ourselves to each other and get to
Oh,
know each
I'm
other,
hands down.
and
I
that's
tell people all the time, and even in trainings, I'm like, if you want to
yeah,
get to know someone, listen to their playlist. Like
right,
everybody, we all have them. In fact, I tell
right,
people, I advocate all the time of that you should have multiple playlists because you need to think about having a playlist for going to the gym, a playlist for cleaning the house, a playlist for when you're sad.
right,
But yeah, if
right,
you really want to get to know someone, or even just,
yeah,
and it's not saying that therapeutically built, they're built for the person. But then when you listen to them, even if you're just skipping because you know some of the songs, but then asking them the stories, like why this song? Like
yeah,
why you have this program of sad songs, but then there's this one that's really obscure because you find out so, to me, it is the most beautiful vulnerable way to get to know someone. And sometimes there are tears involved because it's so
yeah,
meaningful. And
yeah,
the stories come from it.
yeah. And that's what kind of goes to what you guys are doing at Cora Health is that you're curating music to be used in this certain way to help with patients, right? To help in a therapeutic way. You're curating music that's going to enlighten their mood, right? It's going to help them feel energetic, right? It's going to help them feel calm. All of these great attributes that come from listening to music is it's a wonderful way, I feel like, to just continue the way that we express how we feel and really enhance our mood or make us feel calm or tap down on our anxieties, whatever it can be. It has just a wonderful way of doing that. And I feel like that maybe is a little bit different. I'm a little bit biased, but I think that's a little bit different than other forms of art. I feel like music has an ability to just do these wonderful things. And so I think about it, just going back to what we were talking about before, is that these things enhance the business, right? Your presentation of your business and what you want to give to your customers, to your patients, and so forth. And ultimately, the money that you pay as a business, the license, this music, right? It does go back to the people who've made this wonderful music and put it out in the world and have given you the opportunity to be able to enhance your business and express it in a way like if you're curating that for your audience, for your customers, it's allowing you to do that, and that's a wonderful thing. And this just keeps the business going, right? There is a sense that for creators, they're creating this art, they're expressing themselves, and if they can get paid for that, that continues the process. There's a reason why there is copyright in the laws, right? It comes from the idea that we want to encourage creative expression. We want to encourage the arts. We want people to work in art and science and develop these things. And so, how do we encourage them? We give them protections of their art or their, when you talked about science, you're talking about patents as opposed to copyrights. But that all extends from this idea that we want to make sure that people are incentivized to do this, right? And so the incentive there is that someone can make a living by doing these things, right? And now I know a lot of people may think of music as being a hobby and so forth. There are real lives here. And people may think of musicians as being the Taylor Swifts of the world and the Bad Bunnies of the world who are making a lot of money, but there's a whole middle class
Oh,
of
yeah.
musicians and songwriters out there that have the opportunity because of the fact that they have copyright protection and that they can get paid for their music being used commercially. So that's ultimately a good way to think about it, I think, in the context of, or as opposed to thinking of it, oh, here are just some extra fees that we have to pay to these organizations that I don't really know anything about. The money does go to the creators, and that's a good thing. And that's one of the main things that I advise my musician clients and my songwriter clients is one of the first things that you do when you're just getting started is sign up with a company like ASCAP or BMI and register with them, because that means that your music is now in their catalog, and that's one of the first steps when you want to launch as a musician and you want to start putting your music out there commercially. That's one of the main things you do, and that's one of the main sources of income for writers is from ASCAP, BMI, SESAC, or GMR. If they're a member of those companies, they'll receive royalties periodically for as long as their music is being performed out there. And that's one of just many sources of income that's available to music creators. And so it's a way to help sustain the music economy. And I think
Yeah,
that's
and
a good thing.
I'm going to use this from now on, but as you said, it's the protection of it because that's what this is doing, is that it's giving them an element of protection, but then where they can play on and stuff. And so yeah, I can't thank you enough for today. Like, I knew there would be a lot of people tuning in that were going to learn so much, but it's even for me, there's like pieces that you've talked about that I forget, or even like what we're talking about, like protection. Like, that's really when people come in going, oh, it's just another service or it's just another, and it's no, there's such a rich history and its purpose
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how it's
Yeah.
protecting so many people.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a pleasure to talk to you, not just about specific legal issues
Mhm.
that I am normally talking to you about and how to resolve a
How
problem
to
here and there,
resolve,
right?
yeah.
So, yeah. So it's nice to just talk generally about
Um,
why is it that these,
the
that
why.
ASCAP exists, right? What's the enticement for an artist,
Mhm.
right, to create music? They get
Mhm.
protection, right? Why do we have
Right.
to pay fees? It all stems from these things, and I find it enjoyable to talk about those aspects because I don't find many opportunities to talk about it in that way. And it goes back to just our enjoyment of these things as just humans, right?
Yeah, we all have songs that are part of our own personal soundtracks of our
Right,
lives, from
right.
when we were younger to what we're listening to as we're now aging in life and things. And so it is. And just like we have a personal soundtrack, a single location has a soundtrack that, just like you said, that if they haven't thought about curating it, is everything has a sound to it. It's whether or not you're going to curate it or you're just going to have nothing and just let. It was interesting how you're talking about waiting rooms, and sometimes that's all you hear is like a ticking of a clock. That's a sound. And if you're
Right,
going into get the test results from something and all you hear is a ticking, think about that anxiety level. Think about
right.
how I'm going to feel now when you get in front of me because you've had me sitting in the lobby just listening to a clock tick. And I am going through all of these scenarios in my head versus just taking control of that sound and bringing something. What I always sign off my emails is like that care in the air and curate it through music and through artists that you love, music that you love, but as a reflection of if I'm a doctor and it's my own practice, that it's this is how I want people to feel as soon as they open the door.
Yeah,
And I
right, right.
definitely don't want them sitting with the clock for 20 minutes while they're waiting in the lobby.
Of course. Yeah. And if you were to go to a hip restaurant, right?
Oh,
Someplace
yeah.
in the city and you're spending lots of money on a
Oh,
valet and the appetizers and so forth. I think you want to hear something in the background, right? Something that you appreciate the ambiance, and music has a big part of that. And if I'm there and I'm hearing in the background a song that I recognize or I enjoy, that's curated for audience of like-minded people that enjoy this type of music, I'm gonna tell all my friends, hey, you should go
yeah.
check out this restaurant. It's really cool. Oh, by the way, they have great playlists, right? So yeah, it adds to our experiences. And if you think about it that way, maybe it's not so hard to cut that check to
Yeah.
ASCAP and BMI and so forth to pay those fees, knowing that it does go to the creators of this music who are there making new music and who are able to do so because they're getting paid. And we want to keep that engine running so that
Yes, we do. Yes, we
continue
do.
to enjoy music in public and continue to have new music come out and enjoy old music too, right? The writers of music from many years ago, they are still getting paid too, right? Because
Yeah.
their music is getting continued to get played in these spaces.
It's
That's a
on.
great thing. So I think it contributes to our experiences
Without a
and
doubt. We don't have anything of our life stories that doesn't include music. You think about birthday parties, you think about weddings, you think about graduations, there's always music
right.
that's involved because it's so meaningful, but because we're so consumed by it that we almost forget to recognize its power
Yeah,
because we're using
exactly.
it all the time. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah. So maybe every once in a while you think about, oh, there is value. There's value
Mhm.
in this art, in this expression
Yeah.
that we often would take for granted because it
Yeah, I
is
do.
so intertwined with our lives. We hop in the car, music's on. We come home,
Mhm.
maybe it's on in the background when we're there. We go to a public space, there's music playing, right?
Yeah.
There's music everywhere. And sometimes we do take it for granted. So just to think about it from that perspective that, hey, there's value here. Someone created this music. There's a whole economy here based off of the rights that were granted to creators by Congress many years ago, decades ago. And so it's just a long tradition here of public performance. And I think that what you guys are doing here is great in that you're educating people about not only is this something that will enhance your services to your
Mhm.
customers and clients, but by the way, we'll take care of your licensing and
Yeah.
handle that stuff because these are obligations you probably don't want to worry about too much. So
Yeah, exactly.
so, anyways, it was an enjoyable experience, a pleasure talking to
Oh,
you
thank
today.
you. But I do have one last question.
Yes.
Just because of the history that you shared, what was your first concert?
My first concert was a good one. I thank my parents. They took me to see Paul Simon, who was touring behind the album Graceland. And that was my
Oh,
very first
wow.
concert. I must have been in elementary school. I'm not sure what grade, what age I was. But this was probably in the mid 1980s, so I was probably about 10 years old, 9 years old, and
Wow.
that was my
Go
first
mom
concert.
and
So
dad.
it was a good one. A lot of
Mhm.
people's first concerts maybe not as good as that one. So I got
It's
it.
whatever they
I
got free
got
tickets to.
yeah. I just got thrust into it, and so I
They
became a
set you
Paul
on the
Simon
path. Mhm.
fan. Loved that album. Played it front to
Wow.
back on probably on cassette tape back then. And so yeah. So thank you to
Yep.
my
So
parents.
that's what it was. Little did you know, or they know, but that was your trajectory right then. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. Thanks, mom and dad.
e- exactly. So yeah, what was your first concert, Debbie?
Oh my goodness. My first concert, I was in junior high and I was part of this cheerleading group and we all voted. And so my very first concert was Boys to Men with Bobby Brown.
Oh wow. Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah. That was probably yeah. Those were the types of first concert experiences a lot of my friends had.
Yeah, my son's first concert that I took him to, we were visiting New York. He was 10 years old, and it was a friend of mine who had somehow gotten these tickets. She got sick. None of her friends could go. We just happened to be in New York, and she was like, "Would you want these?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And it was Billy Joel.
Oh, nice.
And
That's
yeah,
a
and
good
so my
concert.
son, and so they were, and it was at the garden, and so yeah, we're sitting there, and I'm looking at my son, and he's all into it, and I'm like, dude, don't get used to this. This was like, this is,
Yeah.
but it is. He's to this day, he still loves Billy Joel because
Yeah.
it's that association of that first concert.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ticket prices were a little bit different back then.
Oh, yeah, they're a little different. Like I said, I lucked out, got them for free. But
Yeah.
yeah, very much
Yeah.
lucky. All right, my friend, I cannot thank you enough for this. It was such a joy.